In this video, we'll take an in-depth look at the 2005 Fantastic Four movie game, the Fantastic Four's first legitimate video game outing, since we're not counting that rough PS1 attempt. Along the way, we'll discuss behind-the-scenes details, Easter eggs, and how both the game and movie compare to the comics. In order to properly examine it, let's start at the beginning with the game's development. Activision was the publisher and chose 7 studios to be its developer. It was founded by Louis Peterson and Margaret Stohl, with Margaret being the creative director for this Fantastic Four game. A fun fact about Margaret is that she later went on to write for Marvel Comics, with some notable examples being the Mighty Captain Marvel series and Life of Captain Marvel. The rest of the team at 7 Studios were big comic fans as well, which is what I assume won them the right to make the Fantastic Four game in the first place. In this behind-the-scenes video, Louis and the other team members discuss their excitement for the project, as well as their goals for the legacy of the game.
I'm a massive fan of Fantastic Four.
I'm actually a fan of the Fantastic Four.
We're a group of guys who make games. We love superheroes.
We literally danced around the office. We were so excited.
Figuring out what is going to be the most interesting, the best, the most exciting Fantastic Four game possible.
The next minute, I was on a flight to New York to shoot city pictures.
Feels like, as a company, this is a game that we were created to make. Well, there are a lot of hardcore fans of Fantastic Four out there, and this game will definitely appeal to them. One of my goals in Fantastic Four, the game, was to make it into a collector's item. Not only a game that lasts with the extra features, all the work, all the little touches. It's something that if somebody really loves Fantastic Four, they're going to want to have on their shelf because they're going to refer back to it and have that sort of a piece of history. Comic book history is one of the things we're trying to accomplish with this.
So it's clear that 7 Studios had a passion for these characters and wanted to bring their love of the comics to the game. To help accomplish this mission, they were aided by 2 writers, Zach Penn, who already had an existing relationship with Marvel, with writing credits on movies like X2 and Elektra. And he brought along his friend Martin Senior, which they describe in this behind-the-scenes video.
I have worked on a bunch of Marvel movies as a screenwriter, and I actually am friendly with people at Activision, so they had been looking for years for something for me to work on, and since I was intimately involved with the Fantastic Four on the studio productions side, and since I'm a kind of an avid gamer anyway, they asked me if I would help coordinate the writing of the script for the video game.
I got involved through Zach Penn, actually. We are old friends and writers, and we've worked together on a few different projects. I did some writer's assistant work for him many years ago on some movies, Inspector Gadget, some Small Soldiers, and a few other things. The thing what Zach and I did mostly together was play video games. And we're both geeks, and we just, grew up from the Atari 2600. When this project came around, Zach had done work for Marvel on some of their other movies. And when they called him to work on the Fantastic Four game script, because he had also done a draft of the Fantastic Four movie, he called me up and said, hey, this would be fun. We've been talking about trying to do a video game together for a while. And so now there's been this sort of industry shift to open up opportunities for Hollywood movie writers to work more on video games and vice versa. So the synergy happened that Zach and I were brought on board by Activision to adapt the movie into the game.
Interestingly, Zach and Martin weren't writing the script from scratch, as 7 Studios had already laid out about half the levels beforehand, as described further by Zach.
The movie script was the model for the game. I mean, first of all, to be fair, Marty and I came in to help something that had already been, quite a bit of it had already been laid out when we came in. Our job was to say, take all these pieces, take all these different levels, and try to turn them into a coherent story, and then also to try to match it up with the movie. And one of the things that's difficult about that is that the movie was being rewritten while we were doing this. So, part of my job was to go get pages from the studio and say, hey, is it Dr. Doom, or is it Von Doom, or is it Van Damme? What's his name now? Or is this scene staying in? Is Brooklyn going out? I mean, there were a number of scenes that actually I think end up getting cut from the movie that are still in the video game that are, I think, a lot of people's favorite scenes.
Zach mentioned some interesting things there. First off is that Doom was at one point going by the name Van Damme. Fox had been looking into doing a Fantastic Four film for a while, but took years to finally pull the trigger, so there were a few different versions of the script floating around. I read 3 of them, although I'm sure there are more, but the 1998 script by Sam Hamm was the one that had Doom going by Victor Van Damme. I should also mention that Van Damme was used as Doom's name in the 2003 Ultimate Comics, so it might have returned in later drafts due to that. Regardless, I'm really glad that they just stuck with Von Doom for the final film. Zach also mentioned cut script scenes still making it into the game, specifically a Brooklyn level, which is a Thing-centric mission that we'll look at shortly. Although this is a movie tie-in game, I appreciate that Seven Studios and the writers recognized that the movie's narrative wouldn't work great for the entirety of a video game, with it being an origin story. So instead, they opted to put more focus on the comics, to provide noteworthy locations and characters for the player to interact with. So the majority of the gameplay we'll be looking at today will be based on the comics, so we'll have a lot to discuss. Still, the game's backbone is the film, which feels the most evident through its voice cast, the actors from the movie, which I wanted to confirm ahead of time before we start hearing dialogue from the game. Each cast member was also interviewed as part of the game's bonus content, so we'll watch those later as well, since it's pretty cool hearing their thoughts and seeing them record lines back in the day. This includes Julian McMahon, who sadly passed away due to cancer recently. He seemed like a very nice, fun guy, so I'm really sad to hear that he passed, especially at such a young age. I at least take some solace knowing that his legacy lives on through his work in these movies, as well as in the game, so I think it'll be nice to watch some of his interview especially, which we'll look at in the audio section of this video. But next, let's continue forward by taking an in-depth stroll through the game's story, level by level, discussing everything interesting that pops up, like Easter eggs and references. We'll also discuss the quality of the game and how it holds up today, especially because I want to see how it compares to Zak Penn's own comments years later in his documentary Atari Game Over, where he refers to it as one of the shitty movie games that he's worked on. I'm gonna go on a limb and say he's being a little too harsh, but let's take a look for ourselves, beginning with the game's opening cinematic.
Is he dead?
Victor, why? How?
This ends now!
Ben, can you read me? We need your help on the roof! Ben!
Susie, I'm coming. I've got a problem here. How in the name of me sweet Aunt Petunia did I get here anyway? Reed Richards. He's the reason I was flying shotgun up there. I'd do anything for that guy. Even make a deal with Doom. Reed wanted to study a cosmic cloud. He needed money and a space shuttle. Victor had both. Reed said his research could save lives, but Victor was seeing dollar signs. Then she walked in. Sue Storm was the whole package, looks and brains. Reed almost married her, but he married his work instead. For a smart guy, he was not so smart. Now, Sue was working closely with Victor, his arch rival. Ouch. They made the deal that changed our lives forever. Johnny Storm, astronaut. What a joke. He was lucky his sister was running the show. I thought dealing with Johnny would be the worst of it. Boy, was I wrong.
Ben, you there, big guy?
Sorry, Reed. Daydreaming again.
The cosmic cloud is gaining speed. We need to get those adamantium shields locked down before it hits.
Please hurry, Mr. Grimm. Our futures depend on it.
I like the detail that the shields are made of adamantium. If that sounds familiar, it's the same fictional, unbreakable metal that's coated to Wolverine's bones. Zak Penn, co-writer for this game, also worked on the X-Men movies, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was his inclusion. Along that same line, there's also a deleted scene where Reed adjusts his face to look like Wolverine.
a stronger man.
But looking at this opening cinematic more generally, it starts very similar to the movie, but it's a bit different from the comics, so let's look at how they compare. In the original comics, Reed Richards constructed a rocket ship to get to space. This was during the time of the space race, and he was adamant that they needed to fly the rocket now or never, or else the Russians might beat them to it. However, Reed had a few issues. The first was that the US government was threatening to withdraw funding from his project and wouldn't approve a flight. The second were cosmic rays, which were still a risky, unknown variable. Still, Reed was determined that they needed to fly the ship into space now. His solution was to form his own crew and sneak them aboard. First, there's Ben Grimm, his old friend from college who had become a skilled pilot. Ben was actually against the plan initially though, telling Reed that the current shielding wasn't sufficient enough to protect them from the cosmic rays. Reed disagreed, and Ben soon came around to piloting the ship when another member, Susan Storm, Reed's fiancée, told Ben he was a coward if he didn't do it. Ben's masculine pride couldn't allow that, so he agreed to fly the rocket. So together, Reed, Ben, Sue, and her little brother Johnny all snuck aboard the rocket and flew it into space. However, just as Ben predicted, Reed had miscalculated the durability of the rocket's shielding, and it wasn't enough to protect them from the cosmic rays. They engaged the ship's autopilot and quickly returned to Earth, and upon their arrival, they realized they each had special powers now. Susan could turn invisible, Johnny could become a living flame, Reed could stretch his body, and Ben got the worst of it, becoming a rock-like monster, unable to revert back to his human form. While we're comparing the movie and game to the comic, you may notice a member missing from these issues. That's because Victor Von Doom wasn't present for this space flight in the comics, so everything about Reed needing funding from Victor's company, and Susan working for/dating Victor is all new for the film. In the comics, the following is how everyone knows each other. When Sue and Johnny were young, their mother died in a car accident. Their father was a surgeon who attempted to save her life, but was unable to. This sent him into a depression that he attempted to cure with gambling. He soon ended up in deep debt with a loan shark, which later caused a fight between them in which he killed the loan shark, resulting in him being sentenced 20 years to life in prison. Sue and Johnny were then sent to live with their aunt who ran a boarding house. One of her tenants was Reed, which is where he met Sue and they began to date. Reed was also going to Empire State University at the time, where he roomed with Ben Grimm, who was there on a football scholarship. Reed told Ben he was going to build a rocket, and Ben said he'd pilot it when the time came. After college, Ben became a test pilot for the Air Force, which is where he developed the skills to fly Reed's rocket. Victor Von Doom, on the other hand, also attended Empire State University alongside Reed and Ben. Reed even initially offered to room with Victor first, knowing they were both there on science scholarships, but Victor refused since he wanted privacy to conduct his experiments. He also considered Reed annoying and prying due to how much Reed wanted to talk and discuss notes. Victor's experiments differed considerably from Reed's too, which we'll discuss a bit later when we see Doom's powers emerge in the game. Speaking of the game, let's return to the story for our first level. It's a pretty simple introductory mission based on the movie where we play as Ben in space, attempting to quickly close the shields as the cosmic storm approaches. He does what he can, but soon needs to make a desperate leap back to the station. He's a little too late, catching the brunt of the storm as we see more rays make their way through the ship and contact everyone on board. We then cut back to Earth as Reed wakes up in Victor's hospital, discovering his body can now stretch. Reed decides he needs to find the others, which begins a series of tutorial levels for each character. This is handy because each member of the Fantastic Four is playable and has unique gameplay characteristics. For starters, Reed's smarts are utilized through various terminals across the game, which are hacking minigames. You have to align the pathways to form a circuit, unlocking or taking control of something, in this case just unlocking the door. It won't open fully though, forcing Reed to stretch through it, which I thought was a nice touch. We'll also get a taste of combat here, since Victor's security sensors analyze us as an unknown threat, sending robotic guards to apprehend us. I thought the guards were a fun nod to the comics as well, since Dr. Doom is known for having robot guards known as Doombots. As far as Reed's early combat, it feels really good. You have special attacks that cost energy, such as a stretch punch or deploying explosive robot spiders, but there are also basic combat moves via light and heavy attacks, and inputting different light and heavy combinations can trigger different moves, but we'll unlock those as the game progresses. As it stands right now, the combat feels surprisingly satisfying and snappy. I say surprisingly because I don't often have high hopes for movie games, but so far, this one's off to a good start. We'll next leave Reed as he searches for Sue and jump to our next playable character, Human Torch. Unlike other games in which he appears, Johnny will be on fire for the entire time he's playable in this one, and I think his fire effects look really good. During one of the developer interviews, Lewis Peterson describes how 7 Studios and the movie's effects team both collaborated on the final look of Johnny's flame.
Well, some of the interesting interactions that we have between the film and the game actually were early on when we were doing the flame for for Johnny. We actually took some of our early versions up to the movie set when we were doing it, and we had conversations, our artists had conversations with their artists as far as how they were developing the technology, the particle effects for Johnny. And they looked at what we were doing, and we looked at what they were doing. We actually were able to learn from each other and come up with something that was even more interesting for both of us.
His gameplay feels really good too, and will first utilize his ability to throw fireballs, which is paired with a tutorial for using the lock-on camera, something I'll want to discuss more later on in the video. My favorite is his flame wall ability, where he can leave a pool of fire on the ground that damages anyone that walks through it. We can also pair this with flammable canisters in the area, creating another hazard for the enemy. I thought this was really cool because it gives Torch the unique characteristic of area denial and provides some nice strategy as you decide how best to place flames or engage with the environment. We'll next turn our attention to Sue as she discovers she can turn invisible. She quickly realizes she should find the others without being seen, and will do just that. However, we get to test out a cool feature with her invisibility, and it's the ability to do stealth strikes on anyone we sneak up behind. Okay, so Sue just casually whipping out a backflip right there is a bit of a surprise, but things get crazier when we engage in combat and see her start throwing flying kicks around. So what's the deal? Is Sue a martial artist in the comics? Well, sort of. The developers admitted that they raised some eyebrows here with Sue's martial arts prowess, but they are pulling from some things in the comics. In one of the earlier issues, Sue mentions being trained in judo by Reed, but more than that, she was also trained to fight by Iron Fist and showed exceptional skill, so there is some basis for this in the comics. The rest of her combos are pretty cool too, as she'll use her powers to make force blades on her arms. In that way, her combat kind of reminds me of Psylocke from the X-Men with her martial arts and psi blades, which is a compliment, and Sue overall is very fun to play as. Continuing on, Reed and Sue eventually run into each other and discuss how the storm affected them. The reunion is cut short as they're soon ambushed by more Doombots. This begins a section where the two fight alongside each other, and if you're playing single player, you can switch between the two characters at will. I should mention that this game does contain a co-op mode as well, and even though this is the first duo section of the game, if you selected co-op mode, you'll actually have a partner in each prior level. For example, during Ben's astronaut mission, the second player would use a little helper robot who mostly just floats around but is given a couple of interactions to close some shields. In the hospital level, the second player uses a Doombot with limited combat abilities. The later levels typically give you another playable Fantastic Four member, so it's not always robots, but we'll discuss co-op a bit more later since I think it's actually the secondary version of this game, with solo mode being the main focus. Going back to the level at hand, we're introduced to another neat feature where each member can use their powers to support another. In this example, Sue puts a force field around Reed so he can travel through a laser grid. The other characters have their own unique boosts as well that they can hand out, like Torch creating a fire ring around an ally. Admittedly, I didn't use this feature much in either solo or co-op play, but I thought it was at least a cool idea to try and simulate the teamwork feeling you'd expect from the Fantastic Four. Next up is the last member of the team, Benjamin Grimm, the Thing. He wakes up and is alarmed to find himself covered in orange rock. Poor Ben doesn't even get much of a chance to register it, as his room is swarmed immediately with Doombots. We'll next fight through waves of them as we test out Ben's abilities, and I've gotta say, he's easily my favorite to play as. The other characters feel great, but Ben's attacks all hit with a satisfying crunch, and each attack deals damage in a devastating radius. He really feels like an unstoppable force. Not only that, but he has the unique ability to pick up enemies and punch them, and he can also pick up poles on the ground and use them as bats. So he has an extra layer of interactiveness that the other characters don't. Soon into our fight, the rest of the crew shows up, and Ben reluctantly lets them in, still feeling a bit embarrassed about his new look. Regardless, this begins our first full team fight as we work together to defeat all the Doombots in the room, including one giant mech. We can freely switch between the various members to deal damage as we please, and it's a lot of fun swapping around and using specific members as needed. Once the mech is damaged enough, we switch back to the Thing and complete a mini QuickTime event. When successful, Ben launches it through the wall, which he chooses to escape through himself. Before they can chase after him, we get a cutscene showing Victor finally enter the scene. He's demanding answers from Reed, but Reed tells him it'll have to wait as they first need to find Ben. Like in the movie, Reed states that he's probably headed home. Reed's reference to home differs a bit between the movie and game though, as in the movie, Reed looks at an old photo of Ben with his fiancée Debbie. In the film, Ben attempts to contact her after escaping the hospital. The game deviates from this though, since Debbie doesn't feature at all in it. Instead, home refers to where Ben grew up, on Yancy Street.
Be careful, Alicia. The subways can be very dangerous.
Don't worry. I'll be fine.
I always worry about you, my dear. Good night.
Good night.
Hey, lady, this street ain't safe at night.
Yeah, so we came to protect you.
I already told your boss. I don't need any protection.
Everyone needs our protection on Yancy Street.
But who's gonna protect you, punk?
Okay, there's a lot going on there, so let's take a moment and discuss what we just saw. First off, I love that Ben's wearing a trench coat since in the comics, this is his usual outfit when he wants to go out in public, but wants to try and remain somewhat inconspicuous. An even better nod to the comics though, is that Ben has returned to Yancy Street. Ben grew up here with his older brother Daniel, who even led the Yancy Street gang. Sadly, Daniel was killed in a gang fight, which Ben witnessed. Ben later followed in Daniel's footsteps and eventually became the leader of the gang as well. He strived for better things though, and left Yancy Street after getting a football scholarship to Empire State University. Still, Ben's roots are in Yancy Street. Regardless, the neighborhood and its inhabitants aren't kind to him, as they regularly prank and mess with him in the comics, to the point that they become a real thorn in his side. So getting to beat them up in a moment will feel quite cathartic, even beyond the way they just threatened a blind woman. Speaking of which, what was going on with her and her father? Well, she's from the comics and her name is Alicia Masters. She's a blind sculptress who ends up in a relationship with Ben. The weird dude she was with is her stepfather, Philip Masters. He's a notable character in the comics too, and one we'll see in more depth shortly, so we might as well discuss his comic history now. He's actually a villain to the Fantastic Four, known as Puppet Master. Like Alicia, he's also a sculptor, but he uses radioactive clay which has special properties. When he makes a doll of someone, he can then mind control them, making him a pretty formidable enemy. Even though he's a villain, he does truly care for Alicia and her well-being. In fact, that's kind of how they became united. When Alicia was a child, Philip started a business with her real father, Jacob Reese. However, Philip became jealous of Jacob's idyllic life with a wife and child, so Philip decided to try and sabotage the company's laboratory out of spite. Jacob caught him in the act, and the two of them got in a fight, resulting in Philip knocking Jacob into a vat of the special clay, causing an explosion. When Philip left the lab, he found that Jacob's wife and child had been waiting outside. Jacob's wife Marcia was relatively unharmed, but Alicia was blinded by the blast. Philip kept the details of the explosion a secret from them, and annoyingly got what he wanted, since he later married Marcia, becoming the stepfather of Alicia. However, Marcia soon died from the radiation of the blast, leaving Philip to raise Alicia on his own. Still, Philip loves her and tries his best to take care of her, so it's fitting that he was showing concern for her as they exited the gallery. By the way, the gallery they're leaving is an Easter egg itself, since it's named Kirby's Gallery after Jack Kirby, the illustrator of the original Fantastic Four comics. On a similar note, there are actually a couple notable Alicia-related deleted scenes from the movie, one of which is Alicia's exhibition, where we can see Kirby Gasoline in the background. There are also different statues of the thing that she's created, which are based on his different looks in the comics, such as this original look for him.
I don't know about this one. Lacks a certain realism.
In another deleted scene, where Ben first happens upon her studio, he comments on the sculpture of himself in the window.
Eyebrows are a little big.
This references another comic look of his, where he's drawn with a giant rock eyebrow. We even get a cool nod to the Puppet Master in this deleted scene, where Thing asks Alicia if the puppets on the wall are hers, to which she replies that they're her stepdad's. As to why this scene was deleted, it's probably because things get a bit weird when Thing says he's dusty and doesn't want to mess up her studio. She then takes him to the back to brush and wash him, at which point the romantic music that I can't play, along with the very close-up cinematography, clearly aim to make things feel very intimate. But on that note, let's head back to Yancy Street as Ben takes on the gang. This is likely the same level Zach Penn was referring to as one that was cut from the film but still made it into the game, since there are some similarities to that Sam Hamm script that I mentioned earlier, as it also had the Yancy gang intimidating Alicia, as well as a fight between the gang and Ben. The setup was much different there though, as Ben was slowly transforming into the Thing during this section, since every time he took damage, his injury would be replaced with orange armor-like rock. It's a little weird, and I'll be honest, the script was worse than the movie we got, but I'm getting off track. Going back to the level itself, I found it to be a real highlight. As you'd expect, we'll spend it wiping the floor with Yancy Street gang members. Thing's tutorial level was fun, but this is even better as we're given even more freedom to fully experience the range of Ben's strength. Not only that, but we're also given some good interaction with the environment, such as using the gang's motorcycles as weapons, or yanking down fire escapes where shotgun-wielding enemies thought they were safe. Things rage is limitless on Yancy Street, and it's a real joy to experience as the player. The mission culminates with a fight against the Yancy's leader, and after beating him, we've successfully rescued Alicia.
Are you all right, ma'am?
I'm fine, and it's just Alicia. Alicia Masters.
Ben Grimm.
The astronaut? You're a local hero.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. Well, I gotta get out of here.
From here, we'll jump back to another movie scene where Ben goes for a stroll on the bridge. I always felt this scene in the movie was a bit messy for reasons like the happenstance interaction between Ben and a guy who's about to take a leap off the bridge, as well as Reed forcing Sue to undress and go invisible to get them through a crowd. Even though we see Reed and Johnny just go around them immediately after. In my opinion, this moment in the game is equally as messy. For starters, coincidentally, and for some unusual reason, a firefighter is in the middle of the road as 2 fire trucks come speeding towards him. Ben leaps into action and saves the firefighter, but one of the fire trucks loses control, causing it to dangle off the side of the bridge while a fire spreads nearby as well.
I'm too pretty to die!
So before we act heroically, let's see what happens if you completely drop the ball and fail to pull up the fire truck before the timer lapses. You have to wait quite a while to actually fail this mission, but I thought it was interesting that the developers did animate a little fail screen for it.
It's all my fault.
After that, I decided to do the right thing and pull the fire truck up this time. As far as the game is concerned, everything is great. However, I soon realized that by going straight for the fire truck, the level progresses without you saving the girl from the burning car. The game doesn't acknowledge this at all, but I still felt pretty bad. In the next phase, when you go where her car was, you'll find that it's missing with only fire in its place. Oops. Interestingly, when you save her like you're supposed to, her car will still be there in the next phase of the mission, so I guess it just despawns if you missed her. So she was right, I guess she is too pretty to die. Even beyond the girl in the car, there are also some civilians stuck in some surrounding fire that you can also totally ignore. So I thought it was funny that the game lets you ignore all these people, since this is supposed to be a really heroic moment. Even still, this is the turning point for the team, as the public witnesses them work together to at least save the fire truck. We then get a cutscene showing the team unite, including a surprising cameo.
Sorry I lost it back there.
We understand, Ben.
But we need to stick together from now on. We need to be a team.
A team?
They are a potential danger, sir, but they saved a lot of lives today. Yes, Mr. President. I will keep my eye on them.
Yeah, Nick Fury was not someone I expected to show up in this game, but it's definitely a pleasant surprise. Playing this now, you almost have to remind yourself that this isn't an Avengers game. Interestingly, Zach Penn had reportedly tried to include Nick Fury in the X-Men movies, but it was declined. Fury was even supposed to show up in the Fantastic Four sequel movie, Rise of the Silver Surfer, but he was replaced with the character General Hager when Marvel declined. In hindsight, it's likely because they had plans to include Fury in their upcoming MCU series, since a year after Rise of the Silver Surfer was Iron Man 1, featuring Fury's end credit cameo. So it's pretty cool seeing Fury here in this game, since it was Zach's only successful attempt at integrating him into this universe, but we'll talk more about Fury a bit later. For now, we next find the team fully suited up as the Fantastic Four. In the movie, I like that these suits were used as part of their space attire because, like in the comics, it's stated that they're made of unstable molecules. That, along with them being exposed to the cosmic rays, allows the fabric to adapt to each member's powers, which I think is a good way to explain transitioning them into supersuits. While they test Johnny's powers, they next hear a radio broadcast that monsters have overtaken Grand Central Station.
Sweet! It's hero time. Flame all the way on.
Want me to pound some sense into him, Reed? I can follow him down there.
No, Ben, we need to work together now.
When they arrive, they find it's none other than the Moleman wreaking havoc on the station.
You're no match for the Moleman, fantastic freaks!
It's fitting he would be the first supervillain we encounter in the game, since he was the first villain the Fantastic Four faced in the comics. His origin is that he was a man named Harvey Elder who was shunned by the rest of the world for his appearance. Eventually, he had enough of the ridicule and decided to strike out on his own in search of a land where he could be his own king. His travels brought him to Monster Isle, where he fell deep into a mysterious cave. Down in the depths of the cave, he was trapped and lost most of his eyesight. Still, fortune finally favored Harvey, as he developed a radar sense to allow him to navigate his surroundings, kinda like Daredevil. He also found a bunch of creatures here below the depths, and he became their king. This wasn't enough for Harvey though, as he still harbored resentment for the surface world and how they treated him, so he seeks vengeance against them using his new resources, which is where we find Moleman here in the game. We begin this level playing as Reed and Ben while protecting the civilians from various creatures. Now that we're out of the tutorial missions, I want to highlight that this is how a lot of the upcoming levels will play out, as this game mostly serves as a pretty simple beat-em-up adventure. However, it's not something like Ultimate Alliance, for example, where you get to play as the full 4 members the whole time. More than often, it'll be 1 or 2 members of the team per level, while the full squad is saved for final bosses. For example, the next part of this level sees Reed go alone through the sewers as he attempts to reach Johnny's location. Each character is fun to play as, and I don't mind playing as the team broken up like this, but I did find it odd for a game based on such a team-centric group like the Fantastic Four to have so many solo character missions, especially when it contains a co-op mode. Co-op feels a bit odd too, since as I mentioned, it feels like a secondary feature in comparison to single player. For context, solo missions like this one add a playable character in co-op, but their inclusion feels a bit random. An example being this mission with Reed, since even though he's attempting to reach Johnny's location, Johnny is already here as your second playable character. Johnny's awkwardly used prior to this level as well, such as being in Ben's hospital room during his tutorial mission instead of a Doombot, although there's at least a unique interaction between them at the start of it.
Dang, you really got ugly.
Flames, huh? That's appropriate.
Still, it feels a bit weird since Ben is supposed to be too embarrassed to let the rest of the team in. Torch is even present during the Yancy Street mission, even though Ben ran away from the group. This is why I say co-op feels secondary, because it's clear the story was based around the single-player version, and then characters were thrown in later to make co-op work. I don't want to hate on it too much because I want co-op in this game, but I wish it felt more naturally integrated. I also find it strange that the game and story weren't just crafted from the start with the intention of always having at least 2 playable characters per level, regardless of if you're playing single player or not. My assumption is that co-op was included later on in development, but that's just my speculation. Co-op aside, for a Fantastic Four game, I expect a bit more team synergy, which is another reason I was bummed each level didn't include at least 2 playable characters. But even so, I should mention that I am still having fun during these levels, primarily because the combat is really good and each character's powers feel unique and in line with their hero. So despite many levels feeling less team-oriented, the game overall is still a satisfying combat experience, and even the solo levels are nicely tailored to that hero. For the final level of this chapter, the team returns to the surface to face off against Moleman's giant creature. I was happy to see this fight in the game, since this monster is based on the first Fantastic Four comic cover. The fight itself is a fun one too, as the full team will spend time fighting off mole creatures and dodging the big one's attacks until it places its hand on the ground, at which point Sue could trap it with a force field. After trapping both hands, the team will get to dish out as much damage as they can until it frees itself. This is the pattern we'll follow for the rest of the fight, so nothing too intricate, but it serves as a nice first boss fight. Once we beat the creature, Moleman will vow vengeance against the Fantastic Four as he returns back to the depths. It's a bit odd that they just let him go, but I guess they were feeling merciful, I don't know. But from here, Victor comes to speak with the team.
What's this? Another one of Reed Richards' cosmic failures?
I didn't create it. We destroyed it.
Sue could have been killed. What were you thinking?
Stop! I can take care of myself. The only one who needs your help is Ben.
She's right, Victor. Will you help us?
Victor actually agrees, presumably only because he has a devious secret plan in mind, but nonetheless, they all work together for the time being. To cure Ben, they need to collect additional sources of cosmic energy, which their scanners show can be found in a jungle in Mexico, which is where we head to next. Once there, the team splits up to collect as many cosmic samples as they can. Things won't be that easy though, as we soon find that the jungle is littered with traps, as well as giant spiders and ancient Aztec soldiers. Even worse, we next come face to face with the villain of this chapter, Diablo.
Who dares to tempt the wrath of Diablo?
Hey, buddy, just give me the big glowing rock and there won't be any trouble.
Never! Soon I will harness the power of the gods to rule all mankind.
So much for diplomacy.
In the comics, Diablo is an ancient human born in the 9th century. He's a master alchemist and spent his life finding ways to become more powerful, and even sold his soul to the demon Mephisto to become immortal. He made many enemies through his endeavors though, and was eventually locked away in his castle in Transylvania by the locals, at least until the Fantastic Four accidentally released him during one of their travels. Transylvania had a very jungle-like appearance in those comics, so I like that we find Diablo here in the jungle as well. I also like that it's the Thing that encounters him here first, since Thing was actually the one who accidentally released him in that comic, when Diablo promised to turn him human in return. He actually kind of managed to do it using his potions, although I'd argue he looks more nightmarish this way. Still, the Thing was so pleased he even turned against the Fantastic Four to follow Diablo. This didn't last long though, as Ben soon realized he had been tricked, since the cure was only temporary. In the game, it appears Diablo is already free and continuing his pursuit of power through the cosmic rocks that we're seeking, and has even managed to collect a vital sample needed for Reed's reversion chamber. So from here, we'll continue through the jungle, switching between different members of the team as we hunt him down. The most challenging mission is Sue's, where she investigates a crypt. She alone has to take on this giant warrior who, after a couple of playthroughs, I'm still not exactly sure the best way to beat him. It's a long fight in a very confined space where you have to dodge and damage his back until he falls to the ground. At that point, you have to damage the seal on the wall before he reanimates. It takes a long time to damage the seal, and the hit registration for it felt inconsistent, so it wasn't super clear if I was actually making any progress on it, or even using the proper attacks. So this was a surprisingly tough fight, especially just for a solo character. After beating him, you then need to continue exploring the rest of the crypt, which becomes kind of a platformer. This wouldn't be a problem, except the game isn't really built well for risky jumps. It's hard to describe, but jumping feels really weird, like you're jumping out of mud. The beginning of the jump is really heavy, but then becomes really lightweight once you're off the ground. It makes timing jumps a little weird, which was quite hair-raising during life or death leaps, especially with the threat of having to redo that boss fight again if I died. Not only that, but there's also a giant spider that you fight who can stun lock you with webs, as well as another fight against soldiers that Diablo reanimates, although at least Reed arrives to give you a hand by then. All that to say, this mission is quite long and much tougher than I expected from an early level like this. There also aren't any checkpoints in between, so if you die, you start over. Sue is the strongest member of the team, so she's capable of the challenge, but this level definitely stood out as the one I was least excited to replay on future playthroughs. After this level though, we return to the surface for our showdown against Diablo, as he protects the giant cosmic meteor that we need. I thought this boss fight was pretty good, as it provided a good challenge even though it's a bit formulaic on paper. Diablo will use his chemicals to teleport around the field, so we have to hunt him down and damage him when we can. He'll then take another potion to turn into a giant rock monster, so we have to dodge his attacks until it wears off. This is the pattern that will follow for the fight, and although it's pretty rinse and repeat, chasing down Diablo and juggling his minions created frantic enough gameplay that it kept things interesting. Once we deal enough damage to Diablo, he realizes we have him beat, so he takes another potion to flee. We secure the meteor and return to the Baxter building to test the reversion chamber. It's unfortunately another failure, since the chamber can't generate the necessary power yet. Randomly, Victor takes this moment to invite Sue to the New York Museum of Science and History for the opening of his Von Doom Egyptian wing, which is where we head to next.
Von Doom Industries is proud to be endowing this magnificent new Egyptian wing.
Sure, Victor is rich and handsome, but can he bend himself into a pretzel?
I must protect Alicia while my creatures destroy the Thing.
I didn't discuss it earlier, but there was a brief section of the Moleman chapter where Thing and Reed rescue Alicia again. So between now and then, it seems Ben and Alicia have started dating, much to the annoyance of the Puppet Master. This ties in with the comics, since in Thing issue 34, Puppet Master states that his motivation has always been to stop Thing from dating Alicia. Going back to the game, admittedly the whole setup for this level feels quite random, but I have to say it's definitely my favorite chapter in the whole game. Alicia is secured in a containment cell while Puppet Master takes control of the mummies and various other Egyptian creatures in the museum. I guess he made dolls of each of them ahead of time, I'm not sure, but regardless, we'll spend this level protecting civilians from mummies as we attempt to get things under control. Beyond mummies, we'll also fight some dinosaurs and some statues of the Egyptian god Anubis. Pretty awesome, right? Feels like something you'd expect from a Moon Knight game, but it works great for the Fantastic Four too. As for the rest of this level, the team eventually saves Alicia, before reuniting again to face the final boss, a giant statue of Horus. This boss fight took me a minute to figure out what exactly you're supposed to do, but once you do that, it's actually pretty cool. My initial confusion stemmed from not knowing how to damage Horus. He's shielded and fires laser eye blasts at you, and the only guidance you get is Reed telling Sue to use her shield. I didn't realize until this point that Invisible Woman has a cool unique feature where she can reflect blasts with her shield when blocking. The only problem is, the blasts ricochet randomly, so I was spending a lot of unnecessary time trying to line up random bounces to try and hit him. What you're supposed to do is go into lock-on mode while blocking, which causes the ricochets to go where you're aiming. It makes sense once you figure it out, but I wish the game gave you that information ahead of time. I also mention it as an example of how the game can become dependent on the lock-on system, which I have some complaints about that we'll discuss in the gameplay section of the video. But anyway, once you know how to properly reflect those blasts, this boss fight is quite a breeze. After damaging him this way a few times, we're on to the next phase where Horus fully comes to life and begins to attack us physically. You'll run around for a while until his shield drops, at which point you'll damage him as much as you can before the shield re-emerges. You'll follow this pattern until you deplete his health bar, at which point he'll grab a pair of sickles from the wall and fight you more directly, but without a shield. So for this last phase, you'll attempt to keep your distance and focus down Horus. Overall, it's a pretty straightforward boss fight, but the different phases mix things up enough, and the close quarters environment added some decent tension to make this an enjoyable fight.
That was insane!
Perhaps our cosmic powers cause some kind of reanimation effect.
What other explanation could there be? You're dangerous to everyone in this city.
Well, where were you when the monsters were smashing stuff?
Victor, be reasonable.
I cannot be reasonable when it comes to your safety. As for you, Johnny, I hope your insurance can pay for the fire damage.
You can put it on my tab, bub.
Fine, Victor. I'll be in your office tomorrow morning to straighten this all out.
Sue?
Next time, fantastic fools, the puppet master will not fail.
You're probably starting to notice a trend where all the bosses escape in this game, and spoiler alert, that trend will continue. I assume this was intentional in order to keep them available for any future games. At least in the case of Puppet Master, his escape makes sense since nobody saw him, and I'm personally happy to see him go free as he's someone I'd like to return in the sequel game. Whether anyone does or doesn't return in that game, I'm not sure. I haven't played ahead to it yet, but I do plan to cover it shortly after this one. Continuing on though, Sue does as she said and meets Victor the next day. However, she tells him that she's going to be staying with Reed for the time being while they try and learn more about their powers. This of course makes Victor jealous.
Reed. Always Reed. If there was no Reed, then what would you do?
If you're familiar with Doom in the comics, you'll know that a key characteristic of his is his rivalry with Reed Richards and how petty Doom can be just to get one up on him. So I like that the movie and game stay true to that. Probably one of the best examples of this in the comics is when Sue becomes pregnant with her and Reed's second child. Since the child was conceived in the negative zone, the childbirth is causing complications and close to killing Sue and the baby. To make matters worse, Reed is away elsewhere at the time, against his will I should add, so Johnny sought out Dr. Doom to help Sue give birth to the child safely. He agreed once Johnny said please, but also had a couple of conditions, such as becoming the godfather of the child, as well as being the one to name her. Using his medical and magical expertise together, he was successfully able to assist with the birth. When Reed returned, Doom tells him, quote, "I believe congratulations are in order. And thanks." He also adds, quote, "Enjoy your family, Richards, and remember every time you look at your wife and daughter that Doom saved them both, when once before you could not." So yeah, Doom's motivations are often focused on one-upping Reed. Going back to the game, our next chapter takes place in the city as Reed and Sue are ambushed by Doombots out of the blue. Things get worse when a giant impenetrable mech is deployed, forcing them to flee. In between this mission, we get another cutscene resembling the movie, where Victor starts to discover his new abilities. In his rage, he punches an elevator wall, showcasing increased strength, while also noticing that his skin is turning metallic. In the movie, Victor learns that his entire body will become an organic metallic alloy, and he also discovers he has electricity powers. Aside from the electricity, this is similar to the Ultimate comics, where Victor's body also transforms into metal. However, this is all quite different from the mainline 616 universe comics, so let's next look at Victor's origins there and how it compares to the movie. So Victor was born in the fictional country of Latveria. His parents were traveling gypsies who were outcasted by Latveria's Baron and his men. Victor's mother, Cynthia Von Doom, was also a witch and sold her soul to the demon Mephisto in order to gain the dark power necessary to finally take the fight to those who had outcasted her group for so long. Still, unbeknownst to Cynthia, Mephisto's power came with a catch. As she laid siege on the village, her powers also killed the children in the area. She was devastated when she realized what was happening and ceased her attack. In her attempt to flee, she was chased by the village and stabbed by a soldier. She survived long enough to reach her husband, Werner, telling him to never let Victor follow in her footsteps. She died shortly after this, and her soul was trapped in Mephisto's realm. Werner did his best to do as Cynthia requested by attempting to dispose of and destroy her chest, which contained all of her magical artifacts. Strangely, it would always reappear, so he settled for losing it amongst his other belongings. One day, Latveria's guardsmen once again found the traveling gypsies, but this time sought out Werner specifically. He was a skilled healer, and the Baron's wife was sick, so they requested Werner come heal her. However, by the time he arrived, he found she was already too sick with cancer for anything to be done. Still, when she died, Werner was the one to blame, so he went on the run, taking Victor with him. They survived alone for as long as they could, but eventually, Werner succumbed to the elements, dying in the snow. Victor survived and was then found by the rest of his group, who then took him in. Victor also soon found his mother's chest and began learning her craft. Victor attempted to learn what magic he could from his mother's notes, but found that he was more adept at inventing things. Using what he knew of magic along with his engineering prowess, he made weapons to protect his clan from the Baron's men. Word of Victor's skills somehow reached America, leading a college recruiter to seek out Victor and offer him a scholarship. Victor agreed in order to use their more advanced tools. This is how he met Reed Richards. However, while Reed worked on his rocket, Doom spent his time working on a way to contact the dead, with the goal of speaking with his mother. He even managed to build a machine to do it, but got some of the necessary calculations wrong. Reed actually spotted the errors and attempted to warn Doom, but Doom's arrogance caused him to brush off Reed's warning. The result was that when Doom used the machine, it caused a massive explosion, damaging him and getting him expelled. It's also notable that the blast damaged his face, although the degree to which was left a mystery. We only ever see Doom's reaction to seeing himself, which is usually in horror. It's also been speculated that Doom is so vain that it might only be a tiny scar on his face that he's severely overreacting about. The movie makes a good reference to this, as we see Doom often overanalyzing the small scar on his face. Stan Lee also mentions Jack Kirby's joke about Doom's look in an interview about the game.
And again, a lot of credit goes to Jack Kirby. All I did was describe what I wanted and how I wanted him to act and be. But when Jack drew him, you couldn't get a better looking villain than Dr. Doom, with that little cowl over him and the armor. And Jack always used to say, Stan, the reason he concealed his face is because he basically looked like you. Jack and I sometimes had a relationship like the Thing and the Human Torch.
In the movie, the scar continues to evolve, and we can only assume that his whole face will eventually become metallic. This isn't how Doom becomes armored in the comics, though. After the explosion, he's still a normal human, and he travels abroad to learn more magical secrets. He eventually encounters some monks and becomes their leader. While with them, he crafts an armor that he has them place on him. Most importantly, the iconic mask, which he orders the monks to place on his face immediately after creation, even though it's still hot. So on Doom's orders, they place the burning mask on his face. Whether he was scarred much before, I'm not sure, but after putting this mask on, I think it's safe to say he's pretty burned now. But looking at Doom's power set compared to the movie, you can see it's also quite different. It wasn't cosmic rays that gave him abilities, he doesn't have electrical powers or metal skin either. Instead, he's a self-made superpower thanks to his genius with inventions, much like Tony Stark, but he also has some minor magical skill. Since I'm more of a purist, I've never been a huge fan of the movie's interpretation of Doom's abilities, but it makes sense that they'd want to simplify things for the film. Instead of going through his whole comic backstory, you just have him get powers with the rest of the group while having the shields from the ship explain how he becomes armored, and then these sparking electrical panels give him electric abilities so he has some range blasts, kind of resembling his gauntlet blasts in the comics. So it's good enough for what it is, I suppose. Going back to the game, we next catch up with Ben and Johnny as Johnny continues to make jokes about Ben's appearance.
So Ben, if you rolled downhill, would you gather moss?
One more crack and it's flame off for you, pal.
Easy, big man. I'm just saying you really rock.
It's go time.
This of course resembles the beginning of Ben and Johnny's fight in the movie, but Johnny messing with Ben is also similar to the comics, since he takes any opportunity he can to prank him there too. Although Ben still manages to get his revenge from time to time. In the game, this leads to a short fight where we play as the Thing as he beats up Human Torch. I'll be honest, I didn't even feel bad about it, since Torch deserves it after what he put me through in that damn Ultimate Spider-Man final race. It still haunts me. But anyway, the fight is soon interrupted when robots ambush them, meaning it's back to cooperating. We'll fight a bunch of robots for the rest of this mission as we attempt to regroup with Reed and Sue. Once together, we fight the giant mech, which ends with a small quicktime event as Ben destroys it. Afterward, we get another cameo from Nick Fury.
With great power comes great collateral damage.
You got a problem, pal?
Actually, I've got 4 problems.
These VDI mechs attacked us.
You need to talk to Victor Von Doom.
I will, as soon as I have the Fantastic Four under quarantine.
Who is this guy anyway?
Nick Fury, agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. and I'm taking you to the vault for your own protection, till I can determine the extent of your new powers.
I like that riff on Spider-Man's "great power comes great responsibility" line there. The vault is another comic reference, as it's a prison for superpowered individuals. In our next cutscene, we see the vault, where the Fantastic Four are being kept in stasis, at least until the power to the prison starts to surge. Someone's initiated a breakout, and we soon see it's this dragon creature causing chaos in the prison. This character is from the comics, and he's known as Dragon Man. His origins even stem from Diablo, who we discussed earlier. In the comics, while the Fantastic Four are visiting a college, they encounter a man named Gregson Gilbert, who constructed an artificial dragon. However, Gregson never brought it to life. That honor goes to Diablo, who used his chemicals to bring it to life to fight the Fantastic Four. Unlike Diablo's other potions, the effects of this one remained permanent, and Dragon Man was a recurring foe, usually used as a pawn by other villains. We don't know much about him in the game though, or the means to his escape. Nevertheless, we're free and the whole prison is in chaos. We'll begin by fighting security robots as Invisible Woman, but we also have a side objective of throwing inmates back into their cells if we can manage it. Speaking of which, I noticed an interesting detail in some of the cells, and it's this poster of a comic-accurate Dr. Doom, maybe even a concept art. I'm not sure why it's here since he doesn't exist in the game's universe yet, but it was still pretty funny to find, and it's actually a really good depiction of Doom. In the next level of this chapter, we'll play as Reed and Ben as they attempt to get full power back to the prison. On the way, we encounter another cool comic cameo.
I am Blaster. Release me, and together we will destroy this infernal place.
As he mentioned, his name is Blastar, and he hails from a location called Ballur, in which he's been the ruler, and Ballur itself is located within the Negative Zone. In fact, Blastar was first unleashed on Earth accidentally by Reed when he ventured into the Negative Zone. Unbeknownst to him, Blastar had been exiled into the same area that Reed was trapped in, and when Reed escaped the Negative Zone, Blastar followed. Upon reaching Earth, Blastar sought to take control of it. The Fantastic Four of course stopped him, but not easily, as Blastar is still a very powerful being with superhuman strength, durability, and the ability to shoot force blasts from his hands. We don't know why Blastar is locked up here in the game, but it doesn't really matter since it's probably best he remain contained despite his claims of wanting to team up. In fact, we'll pass right by him and continue our mission. Despite our best intentions though, Reed reactivating the mainframe has a couple consequences. The first is that it allows Dragon Man to escape Torch and Invisible Woman, who are currently pursuing him. The other is that it allows Blastar to escape, and it turns out he doesn't actually want to team up. So when our paths cross again, we have a little mini boss fight against him, although he's not too tricky to take down. Still, it's fun to fight him and perform a takedown on him as the Thing. From here, we regroup as a team as we ride the vault's elevators to the surface, where we also fight Dragon Man. Like many of the other boss fights, this one is quite straightforward. Damage Dragon Man and protect the elevator from being destroyed. Pretty simple, but it's still a fun combat level, and I like the thematics of the elevator sprinting towards the surface. You get a good sense that if it starts to fall, it's going to be a very long way down. But after defeating Dragon Man, we reach the surface and encounter Fury again.
I think there's been a misunderstanding here.
You're leaving quite a trail of destruction, Mr. Richards. First New York, now Colorado.
Put it on my tab.
There was a riot down there. We had no choice.
I'm on your side, Mr. Storm, but my boss has some doubts.
All right, Fury, what do you want from us?
So, you are the smart one.
From here, Fury makes a deal with us. He explains that some of his scientists recovered shielding from the space station that gave the Fantastic Four their powers. While experimenting with it, things went wrong and cosmic beings emerged and took control of the lab. So Fury wants the Fantastic Four to go in and destroy the creatures. In return, he won't throw them back in the vault. Sounds like a deal. When we enter the portal, we see that cosmic radiation has completely transformed the lab. However, before moving forward, I also have to mention the background music for this level because it immediately threw me off. I didn't mind it too much when I thought it was just some DJ record scratching, because I guess that matches the futuristic look of the level, but when it starts saying Fantastic Four and The Thing on repeat, I'm a bit confused. I guess background music doesn't need a lore reason, but it's so meta-sounding that it's kinda jarring, but also a bit funny. I guess the cosmic energy is a bit more attached to the Fantastic Four than I realized. The music itself has a bit of an interesting story though, and it's that popular bands were paid to create a song for each member of the Fantastic Four. Jurassic 5 was assigned to The Thing, and the background music is part of their song.
6 foot 500 pounds, covered in orange flexible rock. Shaking it right. 4 fingers and toes with brute strength. And he was born on the streets of New York. I'm a fantastic fool. A superhuman team with a theme. Saving these human beings, it seems like you was out of your mind. It's not a dream, it's power to the extreme. It's the ever-loving blue-eyed thing. It's not the time.
As far as the other 3 songs, we'll talk about those in the audio section. Returning back to this chapter, I want to discuss its comparison to the Negative Zone, because I think it's meant to have some loose connections to it. First, we'll fight a lot of bug creatures, which is the minion type of the Negative Zone's main villain, Annihilus. We'll even see Annihilus here, as he's also the main antagonist for this level. Well, sort of, but we'll get to it. In the comics, Annihilus is a powerful insectoid being who gains vast cosmic power through an object called the Cosmic Control Rod, which he wears on his chest. It looks like the game references this visually with this yellow light on his chest, which I assume is supposed to be the rod, but the similar looking lights on the rest of his armor make me question that. In the first level, we already have our boss fight against Annihilus, where he tells us that he's claiming this energy source for himself. So my assumption is that the cosmic experiments by S.H.I.E.L.D. somehow brought or drew Annihilus here with his minions, so it's kinda like the Negative Zone is bleeding into the area a bit, but that's just my speculation, since we never actually get specifics. As far as the gameplay, he's actually a really tough fight, with some very fast flurry attacks, some devastating AoE moves, and the ability to charge his health back up. So he makes for a very strong challenge where you have to try to rush him down before he can heal back up. Once you beat him though, he just runs off into nothing, never to be seen again. I assume he's returned back to the Negative Zone, but that remains a mystery. Like all the other villains, it seems the idea was to keep him around in case they want to use him in a future game. In the case of Annihilus, I think that's a good idea because he's such a notable Fantastic Four villain and honestly, quite underutilized here. But continuing on, the next level is another boss fight against a giant cosmic worm. It's a much easier fight than Annihilus since you'll just run around the environment and damage the worm whenever you can, and you can even burst it down pretty fast with Human Torch. Occasionally it'll climb atop a pillar to heal, but you just break the pillar to bring it back to the ground. Once you damage it enough, the lab is considered cleansed, and we return back to Earth to speak with Nick Fury. He congratulates us on completing the mission, but Reed also takes the opportunity to request more shields from the space station in hopes he can use them to cure Ben. Fury agrees, stating that he'll provide a shuttle for us to head back to space. With that, he heads out, and it's sadly the last we see of him in this universe. From here, we go back to space and find that the station is completely overrun by Reed's plant samples. It's pretty easy to gloss over this in the film since a lot of it was cut, but in deleted scenes, Reed's plant samples were a bigger focus, and they're what he uses to test if his reversion chamber is working or not. Running out of plant samples is why he decides to use himself as a test subject towards the end. In the game, it seems the plants were left in the station and have overtaken it, since once inside, Johnny finds that various bugs and plant life have been enhanced, and they'll serve as our primary enemy type for this level. There's honestly not a whole lot else to say regarding the story of this mission. Thing and Sue fight a giant mutated plant to reclaim the shields, while Reed initiates the self-destruct sequence of the station, at which point the crew head back home to test out the reversion chamber.
You did it!
We did it. How romantic. Well, Reed, I guess you won the battle. But I will win the war. Today is Doomsday.
I should note that Ben wasn't in the chamber during that moment, it was just an empty trial run. But now that Doom is fully suited up and ready to destroy the Fantastic Four, we're on to our final level of the game. It begins with Ben and Johnny rushing outside to check if there are any threats, as the Baxter building is being hacked. Their defense turrets are offline, and Doom has deployed more Doombots to attack them. We'll spend this part of the mission fending them off until the defense turrets are brought back online. We then head inside for the best part of this mission, where a manual turret is being piloted by a Doombot in the lobby. We have to fight our way over to it and overthrow the robot so we can man the turret ourselves. Using it is so much fun here, as you'll spam shots across the lobby as backup for Johnny. If any Doombots get close to you, you can punch the turret to do a damaging spin to knock them away. It's a real highlight moment in the game and it feels really good. X2 Wolverine's Revenge should take notes. The only complaint I have for it is that it's a really long section. Each time I played this mission, I left it with sore thumbs because you're just spamming shots so much. But I imagine the developers knew this was a really fun section and just a one-off, so they probably didn't want it to feel too short, so I get wanting to extend it. After clearing the lobby though, Doom then reveals himself.
Hello, Ben.
Victor? Is that you?
I have something that might interest you. Come with me and I will explain everything.
Ben, no! Wait!
At first, it seems like Ben just takes Doom up on the offer, no questions asked, but in the next cutscene, he states that he followed Victor because something seems off about him. I was confused at how he lost him though, because I assumed they rode the elevator together, until I remembered that in the film, Thing had to use the stairs due to exceeding the load capacity, so I think we're meant to assume he just ran up the stairs. Regardless, when Ben stops to admire the reversion chamber, Doom knocks him into it and powers it up. Doom's goal is to depower the Thing to take him off the board, making it easier to defeat the other members. I know the game is trying to expedite things a bit here, but I like how it's done more in the movie. There, Victor has to woo Ben a bit and convince him that Reed isn't actively trying to cure him. This ties back to the comics, where Reed also vows to cure Ben, but each attempt is only temporary. This is why Ben's willing to trust villains like Diablo more, because Reed so far has been ineffective. Ben's desperation to be human again is a core part of his characterization, and I'd say that it's handled pretty well in the movie. In fact, he's really the heart and backbone of the film, even in the game to a degree. We're following the Fantastic Four as they become a team and a family, but Ben has the biggest arc, learning what Alicia tries to tell him in the film.
Being different isn't always a bad thing.
So I like how in the movie, Ben makes the choice to trust Doom, someone he's been saying is untrustworthy from the beginning because he's so desperate to be like everyone else, when in all reality, it's his differences that make him special. In the game, Ben being forced in the machine kinda takes some of that punch away from the lesson, but the message still comes through overall, as we'll see in a moment. But first, the game detours from Ben as we next focus on Reed and Sue while they attempt to regain access to the Baxter building. There are some fun moments during this mission too, like hacking Reed's hidden security terminals, or using Reed as a bridge for Sue to cross, but the real highlight is the last part of this level, where you get to pilot a giant defense mech that Reed built. It's got a turret gun, missiles, and a giant saw blade that you get to annihilate Doombots with. Like with the turret level, it goes on a bit long, but it's such a fun, unique experience that I'm okay with it. From here, Reed, Sue, and Johnny head to the rooftop to confront Doom, who just floats in the air and nods at them. Yes, Doom, we see the fit. Doom then tells us that he's absorbed the power of the Thing and is ready to destroy us, so we're on to our first boss fight against him. I enjoyed this one, although it plays very similar to the other ones that we've already encountered. Doom floats around in his protective field and unleashes electric blasts at us. Eventually, he'll accidentally depower himself, at which point we damage him until his shield returns. It'll be rinse and repeat like this for a couple phases, but it's a pretty quick fight in general. It's not much, but I think it's a decent introductory fight against Doom, since we'll have a couple more still to go. Also, there are a couple fun details in the background. The first is the Daily Bugle building in the distance, a fun reference to the newspaper company run by J. Jonah Jameson. We can also see a building for Samsung in the city too. As you might have noticed already, there are a lot of Samsung references in the game, so it's pretty clear the movie and game had some kind of Samsung sponsorship. But with Victor knocked out, that brings us back to the game's opening cutscene, where the three members approach Doom only to find that he's alive and still powerful. Sue is able to hold him off for now, but Reed and Johnny are down, and it's clear that Ben's absence is hindering their chances. We then jump back to Ben, who has successfully returned human again. However, he immediately realizes that becoming human has left the team at risk, so he decides he needs to transform back into the Thing. That'll be easier said than done, as Victor still has Doombots in the area. We'll now play as regular Ben Grimm, which is actually a pretty creative section. We don't have our special powers anymore, so we immediately get to feel that weakness as we fight this first Doombot. I'm actually sort of impressed Ben can still box a Doombot, even if it does take a while to down it. Ben has to handle the other Doombots more creatively though, like by pushing explosives onto one, or sending one flying on a conveniently placed conveyor belt, or burning multiple with a rocket thruster. It's a good thing Reed keeps his projects randomly scattered around the building. Things get trickier when Ben realizes he needs to find a hidden panel to access the lab again. He knows the 4 potential locations, but they're randomized, and if you're unlucky, you'll just release more security turrets. I thought this was a fun idea, but unfortunately it's super easy to get stunned in an annoying way by the turrets. Once we re-enter the lab, we have to power up the chamber while Doombots attempt to destroy it. When we get it running, we go straight into the chamber and transform back.
The Thing is back, baby! It's clobbering time.
This was a really great moment because it feels so good to be back at full power as the Thing again. No offense, Ben, but we've spent so much time feeling slow and weak in human form that it adequately simulates for the player the strength that Ben is feeling again as the Thing. So I think that was really well executed. Our power is showcased further throughout the rest of this level as we attempt to make our way to the rest of the team. For example, I like that we can use the same rocket thruster that we were so dependent on earlier and just smack enemies with it instead of using its flame. Another highlight is when you come across Reed's defense mech, this time under Doom's control. We'll have to fight it as the Thing, which feels pretty intimidating after feeling the power behind it ourselves earlier in the chapter. As expected, it provides a strong challenge, but Thing is still able to overcome it quite handily, which further demonstrates the strength of the Thing and how he can be the one to turn the tide of the battle against Doom. Speaking of which, the next level shows Doom standing over Reed, Sue, and Johnny in defeat right before he's about to unleash the killing blow. Ben then shows up, ready to take on Doom solo. I know I mentioned earlier not being a huge fan of the solo hero levels, and although I still think that applies to the game as a whole, I'm willing to give this level a pass because it feels really climactic. With Ben being the backbone of the story and finally embracing his new life as the Thing, it feels right to give him his moment here via a 1v1 throwdown against the main villain. You may be wondering then what co-op mode looks like with this being such a solo-focused mission. Well, it's probably the most awkward inclusion since it uses Human Torch as your second hero, even though we just saw him lying in defeat near Doom. While we're on the subject, the rest of this level didn't feel great in co-op either. For example, that really awesome turret section becomes a lot less fun as the camera remains centered on you and Johnny to the point you can't see down the long hallway anymore. Then, when you're playing as Human Ben, your co-op partner is another Doombot, which isn't too bad initially until the first player becomes the Thing, and then the Doombot feels significantly less useful as it only has some limited melee abilities while the Thing devastates enemies solo. We'll talk about co-op more in the gameplay section, but as you can see, it already feels like such an afterthought. But let's go back to the fight against Doom. The first phase is very quick as it's just a quick time event. If you fail it, Doom will get the upper hand and throw you off the roof for the next phase. If you complete the QTE, Thing will instead pummel Doom into the ground before throwing him off the roof. Phase 2 is the main one, where you're in for a more straightforward slugfest against Doom. However, there are also 3 power rods in the area that you need to take the time to destroy, or else Doom will use them to recharge his health. It can be tricky to get distance from Doom to accomplish this, which made it quite challenging. In fact, this whole boss fight is a good challenge because Doom is quite aggressive and performs really damaging attacks, so you can't ever let your guard down. Once you deal enough damage to him though, you'll perform another quick time event similar to the last one, where if you fail, Doom will throw you off the roof. But if you complete the QTE, Thing will instead pummel Doom again and launch him off the roof, which is much more satisfying. Regardless of your QTE success, Doom will get the upper hand during the free fall and leave Thing dazed. Just in time, it's revealed that the rest of the Fantastic Four have returned, leading to our final battle of the game, a team fight against Doom to replicate the movie's climactic battle. This final fight is on the same quality level as many of the other fights, if not a bit easier since the full team can overpower Doom quite easily, although I imagine that's probably the point. Once you damage Doom enough though, just like in the movie, Reed will call out the order in which each team member needs to do their special attack. Unfortunately, each of these is via a quick time event, which is really where the difficulty of this fight lies, because if you mess it up, Doom goes back to full health and you have to start again, significantly prolonging the battle. So if you struggle with QTEs, you'll probably hate this last fight. It follows the movie really closely though, as Torch will first do his supernova move, at which point Sue contains it in a force field. This leaves Doom still functional, but as molten metal. We'll damage him some more before it's Thing's turn, who will hold him down in place while Reed turns himself into a human water hose, supercooling Doom. This leaves him in what I deem to be a fate worse than death, as he's still living but unable to move at all, trapped in his own body. But still, the Fantastic Four have stopped Doom and triumphed as a team. This brings us to our final cutscene as the four take a victory stroll through the streets.
It's basic, really. 4 is greater than 1.
Now I remember what I missed about you.
I could definitely get used to this.
Oh, yeah?
Flame all the way on!
Show off.
Just like at the end of the movie, we see that Doom is being shipped back to his homeland Latveria, I guess to be used as a statue. I'm joking. It's a nice cliffhanger for the sequel, and it's good to know that Doom will return. In fact, we'll actually see Latveria even sooner because the game includes it as part of some extra bonus levels, which we'll check out momentarily. But to close out my thoughts on the game's story, I thought it was pretty well done. Often, movie games follow the film's story beat by beat, which I think hurts those games, since what works in a movie doesn't always translate well in a game. So I like that 7 Studios opted to only minimally have us replay movie scenes, which was really just at the beginning and end of the game. This helped the game feel fresh as we had more original levels, and the developers got to flex their creativity more. The story overall isn't anything too high level, but I think it serves its purpose of checking off the necessary movie beats while placing us in some unique environments to beat up a variety of enemies. The story is really only a small part of this game though, as the real star of the show is the gameplay. So next, I want to discuss how the gameplay feels throughout it, as well as examine the plethora of bonus content, including some really cool exclusive levels.
It's clobbering time.
Regardless of how you feel about the story, the gameplay is where Fantastic Four 2005 shines. The first thing that really stood out to me is how each character manages to be both versatile enough to hold their own in each level, while also feeling distinct enough from the other characters that nobody feels too samey. I think if I had to choose a favorite, Thing's gameplay feels the most satisfying and impactful, but there wasn't a character I found to be lacking. In fact, I noticed myself switching around the team often, both for fun factor, as well as to pick someone I felt might be better suited to handle a phase of a fight moment to moment. Each hero also had some fun perks specific to them that I think helped make them stand out in certain situations. For example, in the game, Reed is immune to poison, which is nice because poison flips your controls when inflicted, so if you're dealing with an annoying poison-wielding enemy type, Reed is your man. Just as a side note, I don't believe that's an actual ability of his in the comics, just something for the game. Looking at the rest of the team, Johnny is of course immune to fire damage, which comes in quite handy both during combat and in the environment. He also has the ability to glide during a fall, which never actually had any usefulness in the game, but it's something he can do. The only time I actually needed it was to grab an annoyingly placed secret token during the first Doom fight. You have to leap off the building and glide to it to claim it, ultimately sacrificing a life in the process because Torch can't fly upwards. Super frustrating. We'll talk about secret tokens a bit more in a moment though. Moving on to Sue, she of course can utilize her invisibility to bypass traps or sneak up on enemies, but she can also freeze enemies in place, and as we discussed, she can reflect projectiles back at enemies, which is a lot of fun to do too. Lastly, there's Ben, who for starters can pick up enemies and smack them around. This is useful because the other members can only pick enemies up and throw them, or hold them while waiting for a teammate to assist them with a finisher, which by the way is one of the few team-up abilities in the game, but it's a bit clunky to perform and slow to reliably use in hectic fights, especially if you're playing solo and relying on AI teammates. So having extra options when picking up enemies as the Thing was a nice perk. Thing can also pick up items in the environment and use them as weapons, which is also a lot of fun and something exclusive to him. More generally, Thing also has a bigger health pool, making him quite tanky. So all 4 members of the team have some useful exclusive abilities, so I think no matter who your favorite member is, you'll find something enjoyable about them. I also think the game has really good challenge progression, which is important because it's so combat heavy. My fear early on was that the combat would start to feel tedious or repetitive, but I was pleasantly surprised to find that it remained fun even through multiple playthroughs. I think there are a couple key reasons why Fantastic Four succeeds here. The first is good and frequent enemy variety. Each chapter features unique enemy types that require different approaches. For example, the Moleman level has poison-wielding enemies, as well as creatures that can burrow underground and need to be knocked over before they can take damage. The Doombot invasion in the city introduces shielded enemies who need their shields broken first or to be damaged from behind. Another example is the Space Shuttle mission, which features flying swarms of bugs and vines lashing out from the ground, making an up-close approach risky. There are many other examples beyond this, but already you can see some good enemy variety throughout the course of the game to keep the player on their toes. The second key reason is players' combat progression. You of course start off with a nice variety of special attacks, but basic melee combat continues to progress in important ways throughout the game too. You'll start with just a normal light or heavy 3-hit combo, but as you move through the story, characters will unlock new combos. The important thing here is that they aren't just combos for combo's sake, each one actually serves an important purpose. For example, one is especially useful at destroying shields quickly, while another provides strong AoE damage. If you're feeling fancy, you can start to incorporate 4-hit combos, which are more powerful and flashy. As you reach the last few chapters of the game, you quickly realize that you need to focus on using these different, more advanced combos to be effective in combat. This is great because I feel like there are so many games that have a plethora of combos available, but you're still better off just using the faster, starter-like combo attack. That's not the case here, since if you try that, you'll just do measly damage and get overpowered. So I like that 7 Studios forces you to think through your attacks and push yourself to utilize new combos and strategies. Another thing I appreciated about the combos is that they're all easy to remember and that they remain consistent across all 4 playable characters. I feel like many games often overcomplicate combos by making them different across characters or have so many available combos that they just become forgettable as you instead memorize like 2 or 3 all-purpose ones. So I'm glad 7 Studios didn't fall into that trap. I also like that the upgrade menu is quite extensive and will likely require a second playthrough to fully complete. There are multiple upgrade pips, not only for special attacks, but also for your melee combos. Unlocks are expensive, and each pip only applies to that hero, so you have to be mindful of what and who you spend your points on, so you don't leave valuable abilities or heroes in the dust. Beyond that, you can also spend your points on bonus content, which we'll look at in a minute. My main point here is that the game has really good replay value. Furthermore, beyond the upgrade menu, there's also a secret token hidden around each level. They range from really easy to find to easily missable. An example of the latter is your first mission as Sue, where you traverse the hospital and meet Reed at the end. The token can only be accessed for a short period after Reed hacks the first terminal. Your instinct will be to follow the tutorial and bubble him so he can hack the next one, but if you do that, you've already missed your window. You're instead supposed to stop what you're doing and run to the beginning of the level to find the token in a newly opened room. It's super obscure, and I'll admit I had to look it up. The other hidden tokens aren't usually as bad though. Some require you to do an optional extra task like throw all the inmates into their cells in the Void mission, or complete an extra combat section. Usually they're just found off the beaten path or through some kind of interactable. Collecting them unlocks bonus content, and you need to collect the majority of them to claim everything. There are also challenges for each level, like completing it under a certain amount of time or performing a certain number of attack combos. If you complete all the challenges for a level, you'll be given a reward. For example, things like a health or energy upgrade or extra experience points. So they're usually worth completing if you can, especially on your second playthrough if you're going through hard mode. By the way, although it's not called New Game Plus, your second playthrough is essentially one since you can replay the game again on the same save with all your current unlocks, which is really cool. But that covers everything that I really like about the game, so now let's take a moment to discuss some of its drawbacks. The first actually ties in with the challenge system that we just discussed. I haven't really talked about it, but each character has an ultimate ability called supers that can be used once you either find a token for it, or by doing well enough in combat to bank a usage. For example, Mr. Fantastic turns into a wheel and rolls around the battlefield taking out enemies, while the Thing spins around with his fists. These are good room-clearing moves, but I actually found myself disincentivized by the game to use them, since the majority of the level challenges specifically reward you for not using them. So if you're trying to complete these challenges, you pretty much have to forget you even have this ability. Since it can be tough at times to even bank a usage, I honestly just ignored the move completely, and it became a wasted ability slot. In all honesty, I didn't find it necessary to use in levels anyway, so I would have just preferred a 4th generic special ability. There's also the lock-on camera, which the gameplay typically necessitates you use. If you're not locked on, your character will struggle to target the right enemy, or any enemy at all for that matter. Locking on is also how you dodge, as there's no other evasive maneuver except for maybe jumping, so if you're in a bind, you need to try and lock on quickly to start evading. The problem is, it's not a very responsive system. There were so many times that I'd be in a fight trying to trigger the lock-on, but it just wouldn't initiate, causing me to take unnecessary damage or stumble around awkwardly. Then there were times when it finally would initiate, but it would pick the wrong enemy or throw the camera around in a weird way. So I had a lot of issues with the lock-on camera, and I wish it was leaned on less. One of my bigger complaints with the game though is co-op mode. Prior to attempting it, I assumed this would be the ideal way to play. When I tried it, I actually found it to be kind of frustrating and disappointing. On the surface, things are still enjoyable and it can be fun crushing enemies with a friend, so the problems stem more from the game not feeling adequately built to handle co-op effectively. The camera is the first issue since you can both control it, which can be challenging enough to coordinate on its own, but the game also tries to reorient itself as you move through levels. This created plenty of disorienting moments as one character enters a room, triggering the camera to switch, flipping controls, and usually turning at least one character around. Additionally, with 2 of you in a level that was originally created for a single player, you feel like you're crowding each other. As you can see here, even though the camera is zoomed out a bit more compared to single player for a more top-down perspective, there's still not a lot of camera space for you to both occupy, and an invisible wall marks the edge of the camera. So it wasn't uncommon to hit the boundaries of the screen and have to wait for the other player or move closer to them. In combat, this felt especially awkward, trying to independently attack enemies but always feeling just out of melee reach of them. In general, things felt very confined, like I was constantly boxed in, which I essentially was in relation to the other player, and it caused me to lose all sense of freedom. I also found that if you're the secondary player in a level that was originally based on your friend's player character, you kind of feel like you're just there. Yeah, it can be fun to beat up enemies with them, but there's nothing else for you to do outside of that, so you don't feel like you're having that much of an impact. You feel even more useless when you realize that your character isn't in the single-player version of this level at all, and that you really and truly aren't needed here. It's pretty clear to me that single-player mode was the primary focus and co-op was added secondarily, so even though co-op mode is a good idea and something I expect in a Fantastic Four game, the execution here feels too tacked on to the point that I actually find it to be less fun than solo mode, which is a bummer. Beyond that, more generally, the team elements of this game are quite lacking as well. For example, the team boost that you can grant each other. It's a cool feature and probably something you'll engage with a bit more in co-op mode, but in general I found it to be another unnecessary and forgettable ability. The game doesn't even tell you what effect each character's boost is, you kinda just have to play around and guess. The only one the game teaches you to use is Sue's Force Bubble, so you may not even realize other characters can boost each other. It's a decent idea on paper, but I think the execution is a bit lacking since I'd like more usefulness from it. The individual QTEs are pretty lame too, as each character has their own easy minigame when performing actions. Things is to spam a button rapidly, Sue's is just to rotate the stick in a circle, and Torch has a red light, green light style button press where you hold the button when active. I like the individuality, but the act of doing these is pretty unexciting and essentially pointless, especially when they're used as teamwork sections where one character stands on a point and does their QTE, then the other player steps up and does theirs. Again, it feels like another half-hearted attempt at teamwork that's just too shallow. But those are the extent of my complaints. In the grand scheme of things, they're not too dreadful, especially for a movie game. With this being the first legitimate attempt at a Fantastic Four game as well, I'm a little more forgiving, and I think 7 Studios largely gives fans what they want from an F4 game. But now that we've discussed the gameplay as a whole, let's talk more about the bonus content, because there's actually quite a lot. Starting with some of the basic ones, there's a trailer for the Ultimate Spider-Man game, which would have been releasing a few months later that year, and I have a full retrospective on it as well if you're interested. There are also some character concepts that you can view, all of which I thought looked pretty cool, especially the Puppet Master one with his clay molding of the Thing. You can also read selected pages from the Ultimate Fantastic Four comic series, which was ongoing at the time. For the 616 universe, you can view some of these 60s comic covers, which is a fun addition as well. There are also character bios, which give further backstory on characters that we play as or interact with. For the movie characters, their lore follows the movie's backstory for them, while the comic book character bios describe their comic origins. This is pretty cool, especially for the more obscure comic characters, but I was a little bummed that they didn't shed any light on how these characters ended up where they are in the game. Like, why is Blastar imprisoned at the Vault, and how did Dragon Man break free? Surprisingly, the Minion character bios are the most fun to read because the developers clearly had a lot of fun writing them. For example, we have one for this pipe-wielding thug that explains his origins and why there are so many thugs that look like him. Not reused assets, of course. It reads, Eddie likes to beat people up with a lead pipe. His antics have inspired copycat pipe beaters in Brooklyn. In fact, many look-alike punks are often found roaming around Yancy Street hoping to start a fight. Suspect has been known to disappear after being knocked unconscious. I love that the last sentence even provides lore for them despawning. Another good one is the Aztec warrior minion, whose bio is actually a dating profile. It reads, About me, gender, man seeking a mate, age, under 600. Marital status, single, but married 24 times. Body type, muscular, possessed. Smoking, occasional mystic sacred root to speak with warrior gods. Drinking, drinks blood socially. Living situation, tribal, giant spiders with demented alchemist. Have kids, 210. Want more kids? No, in all caps. Interests, art, dining, movies, listening to music, reading theater. I can't describe how much I love this, and I wish more character bios were done this way. Our next unlockable section is all about interviews with various members of the cast and crew. We've already looked at a few of these throughout the video, and we'll look at more in the audio section, so for now I mostly want to highlight the Stan Lee interviews since they're a lot of fun and quite insightful. For example, here's one where he describes how he created the Fantastic Four.
Well, my publisher had learned that DC Comics, which was then called National Comics, had a book called The Justice League, and it was selling very well. And it was made up of a number of superheroes. So he said to me, Stan, why don't you come up with a book with a team of superheroes? And I really didn't want to do the same old thing with guys who just wear costumes and masks and have secret identities, and the girl is always a token girl who has to be rescued all the time. In fact, at that time, I really wanted to quit, because I had been doing these comics for about 20 years, and I had the same instructions from my publisher all the time. Don't use words of more than 2 syllables. Don't play up too much dialogue. The readers get bored reading dialogue. And so I felt I was just writing one-dimensional stories. And my wife said to me, you know, Stan, if you want to quit anyway, why don't you do the next book you do the way you want to do it, just for fun? The worst that happens is you'll be fired, and you want to quit, so what's the big deal? And luckily, that was when he asked me to do this team of superheroes. So I thought, how can I make them a little different than what had gone before? 1, no secret identity. 2, the girl is going to be as much a valuable member of the team as the other 3 guys. 3, instead of the heroine not knowing that the hero is really a hero, you know, the Clark Kent, Lois Lane syndrome, I'll let them be engaged. They know each other and they know what they do, and that's it. And instead of the typical teenage sidekick, I'll get a younger member, but I'll let him be the brother of the girl. So after the girl and the guy get married, he'll be the brother-in-law. So it'll be a little family. And I felt at least that'll make it realistic. Then to continue, I felt Reed Richards will be the hero. Reed Richards, or Mr. Fantastic, as he modestly called himself. I don't want him to be the typical square-jawed hero who says, let's go get him. But I thought I'd make him a little bit more like me, something of a bore. He talks too much. He uses whatever big words he can think of. And I'll have fun with that, because the other members will always say, will you shut up? Can't you explain anything in a simple way? And I thought I'd have them talk to each other like real people do. Then I needed a 4th member who I wanted to be totally different, a guy who's really strong. But I thought, what if he's half monster? What if he could supply a lot of the humor and also a lot of the pathos? And I don't know, I think really, I don't know how I came up with the idea, but I'm so glad I did, because I love the thing. I think he's one of the best characters I ever came up with. As you can probably tell, the main objective was to try to make them as close to real human beings who might have possessed superpowers as I could.
It's quite inspirational to hear that he was near the point of quitting because he felt restrained and just decided to give the Fantastic Four his all, and it ended up being such a huge success. Also during this interview, there are some fun clips of him playing the game with the developers.
I'm gonna hit somebody. Yeah, I'm hitting him hard. Who am I hitting hard?
You're hitting that tree.
Well, boy, that tree isn't gonna mess with us anymore.
I want to play one last clip of Stan here since I thought it was another interesting one, and it's him describing why he thinks the Fantastic Four are so timeless.
Oh, I would like to think if you spend enough time creating characters and you make them as realistic as possible, then it isn't too easy to improve on them. And the only reason you want to change a character is to improve on it. You know, and you could think of so many classic characters like Sherlock Holmes. No matter how they try to do Sherlock Holmes differently, the old Sherlock Holmes is the best one. And the same with Tarzan. There's no way you can improve on Tarzan living in that jungle with the apes and with Jane and so forth. So I would like to think that the Fantastic Four were just well structured. And of course, the way they were drawn by Jack Kirby, the artist I collaborated with, and I like to refer to him as the co-creator of the Fantastic Four, because without him and without that magnificent artwork of his, I don't think it wouldn't have been the same thing. He brought those characters to life visually. And he was very consistent. In his drawings, he gave them the personality they had. And whether it was the 2nd issue or the 100th issue, he never varied them. They were always the same characters. So I think that Jack helped me to build such a solid foundation for these characters that it was just tough to change them as the issues went on.
Outside of these unlockables, there are also bonus gameplay features. For example, a dojo where you can practice your abilities, or an arena where you can take on waves of enemies. The funniest extra mode though is called Guard Granny, where you have to do exactly that. You'll pick your characters and map, and stop enemies from beating up a granny. She even has some voice lines.
Oh, what's the world coming to? Are those robots? I think I just gave me a hot flash.
It definitely feels bad watching Granny get burned by Molotovs or beat with a lead pipe, so it's good motivation to try and protect her, although I admittedly let her die once or twice to see if anything happens. Nothing does, which made it feel even worse. But now let's look at the best bonuses in the game, the extra levels. We'll first start with Hell, which sees the team accidentally get transported there.
Oh no, we must have gotten separated going through Reed's portal.
And your bodies are still on Earth. Your souls are now in the underworld.
So you may have noticed some differences here just in this intro. The first is that Sue no longer looks like her movie counterpart, and is instead now based on the comics. In fact, it's not Jessica Alba voicing her either, it's Grey DeLisle. Grey has an extensive resume, but for the sake of brevity, you'd probably know her best as Catwoman in Batman Arkham City and Arkham Knight. The other members of the team have alternate voice actors as well, specifically Robin Atkin Downes as Mr. Fantastic, who we recently heard voicing Moon Knight in Spider-Man Web of Shadows. Fred Tatasciore voices the Thing, which isn't too surprising since he tends to specialize in monstrous characters with deep voices, like Bane in the Arkham series or Hulk in various games and shows. Then there's Quentin Flynn voicing the Human Torch, and I assume he was picked because he voiced Torch in both the 90s Fantastic Four and Spider-Man animated series. As far as this Hell mission, it doesn't seem to be based specifically on the comics, although it could be very loosely inspired by the Fantastic Four Unthinkable issues, which sees Doom imprison Franklin Richards in Hell via Reed's portal. It also leads to a fight in Latveria, where we have a couple of bonus levels as well. Admittedly, the links between the series and the game aren't very strong, so this is probably a bit of a stretch. The suits, however, appear to be based on the Ultimate comics, which I think is most evident in Sue's outfit, such as the accents on her legs. Though I was a bit confused by Thing being in trunks, since he's usually shown in a unitard in the Ultimate comics, but this cover for issue 6 shows him in very similar looking trunks, so I assume the game is basing their looks off of it. But looking at the game's Hell level itself, we'll begin as Sue Storm trying to find the rest of the team. We'll play solely as her for this section, fighting all sorts of demons and facing off against mini-bosses called Seal Guardians. The final fight of this section is against another Guardian, who we need to defeat to enter the next area.
Reed, thank heaven.
We're a bit south of heaven, sis.
This land is not for the living. If you defeat my champion, I will allow you to return to your living flesh.
I'm not sure who the strange voice is meant to belong to. I usually would assume Mephisto, but letting the team leave seems a little too generous for him, so I guess it's just a generic demon. I might also guess Hades, since a Minotaur is part of Greek mythology and Hades exists in the Marvel Universe, but I'm just speculating at this point. But we'll take on its challenge and fight the Minotaur as the level's final boss. Once we beat him, the demon sticks to its word and sends us home. So there's not a whole lot to this level, but it's still a fun little bonus mission. That's not all though, as we still have 2 bonus chapters taking place in Latveria.
Let's make this quick and hope we don't get caught.
Find our contact, get the info on the missile, be invisible. Anything else?
I love you.
Oh, don't go soft on me now.
The premise for this mission is that the team have learned of a missile being housed in Latveria, so they're here to infiltrate and destroy it. So even though the main story featured a Latveria cliffhanger, this is unrelated to the movie. Things don't go smoothly for Reed and Sue here, since as soon as they enter the area, they're spotted by Doombots, so we'll spend a lot of this mission fighting off Doombots as we explore Latveria. Speaking of which, let's examine the environment a bit, because there are a lot of cool details. To start, I think Latveria looks great and resembles the comics quite nicely. What's even cooler though are the posters scattered around the map. For example, here's one that says, "Let them do the talking," with Doombot mechs featured. There's this one that has a picture of Doom with the caption, "He's watching you." Then there's another good comic accurate depiction of Doom with the caption, "Serve in silence." It seems Doom is ruling with an iron fist, and not all the locals are happy about it. In fact, we'll soon find a resident who tells us that Doom has hidden his missile in a secret fortress in the mountains. In order to get there safely, we'll have to ride on a sky barge. As a side note, it's interesting to me that Doom isn't fondly looked at by the Latverians in this game, because in the comics, they're often very loyal to him. For example, shortly after the Unthinkable series is one called Authoritative Action, where the Fantastic Four attempt to take control of Latveria after dispatching Doom to Hell. The rest of the world sees Doom as a villain, so the Fantastic Four were surprised when the Latverians rejected them as liberators and instead chose to stay loyal to Doom. The reason for this is that he does right by the Latverians, providing everything they need to live. For example, there's 0% unemployment and universal healthcare. He just requires that they obey his rule and not commit any crimes. If they do, criminals are dealt with harshly, and due to this, there's virtually no crime in Latveria. From here though, we next play as Johnny as he locates the sky barge. We then jump to playing as Thing on board.
Time to pay Victor a surprise visit.
Hello, boys. I hope you enjoyed your brief stay in Latveria.
So much for the surprise.
As far as the new voices go, I've really loved this comic version of Sue, but I've been a bit meh on Reed, Johnny, and especially Ben here, sadly. I think Michael Chiklis still does the better Thing voice. Still, I love the look of him, and this is another really awesome level. As you can see, it takes place on the barge as it flies to the mountains. However, the barge itself is a little small for combat, so while we fight robots, we also have to make sure not to accidentally fall off the ledge, which actually adds a pretty fun layer to the combat. Additionally, it's also really fun throwing Doombots off the side. Once we reach the end of the trip, that'll conclude Latveria Chapter 1, so we'll boot up Chapter 2, which is unlocked by beating the game on hard difficulty. We begin in the secret fortress with Sue as our first playable character as she attempts to find the missile. Inside, she'll also find a factory of Doombots, so we can either fight through them all, or just run through the whole level using her invisibility, which is actually pretty fun once you realize it's an option. Another detail I thought was funny is that you can find a bunch of crates labeled D-Bot for Doombots. Eventually, Sue will also find a giant laser being controlled by them.
Reed, Victor's got a new toy.
What is it?
Your standard evil villain-type giant laser. Objectives updated.
We shut it down as Reed requests, although it doesn't quite go according to plan. Still, I like how much fun Sue is having here.
Oops, my bad.
We then jump to Reed and Johnny as they find the missile. However, they also find Doom himself.
Make yourselves at home. Sorry I can't stay and chat.
Honestly, not exactly the Doom voice I was hoping for. Ideally, I wanted something a little more intimidating with maybe a muffled effect from the mask, but I suppose it's not far off from the movie version, which might have been the idea. Like the F4, Doom has a new voice actor here too though, Jim Meskimen. He must have a talent for voicing robot-like characters because after this he went on to voice Ultron in various media, most recently in Marvel Rivals. Going back to Doom, he looks great in his classic comic suit, even though we barely get to see it. In fact, this is the extent of what we'll see of Doom as he descends into the floor, never to be seen for the rest of this game. After fighting our way through more Doombots, we'll next encounter a giant defense mech, much like the one Reed created in the main game, so it seems Doom is copying Reed's inventions. Reed even comments as much shortly after this when he recognizes Doom copied his turret designs too.
My turret design. Victor has no respect for intellectual property. We have to shut them down.
Once we break inside, we find the missile. We only have 10 minutes to stop the launch, but we have the full team reunited again to do it. We'll mostly focus on Mr. Fantastic though, since he needs to hack our way through the area. The final part of this fight takes place in Doom's war room, where we fight his warbot. Reed hacks the final terminal to disable the missile, and then calls Nick Fury.
Richards, do you copy?
Yes, Nick. Go ahead.
We detected a launch, but it's not a nuke.
It was Doom's escape pod. The missile has been secured.
Great work, F4. I owe you one.
And that concludes the Latveria bonus chapters. Again, nothing too crazy story-wise, but I still think these bonus levels were a really fun inclusion. I mean, how often do you get bonus levels like this anymore without it being some kind of paid DLC, especially with new voices? So I found it to be a fun deviation from the rest of the game, and it even kind of works as a proof of concept for an actual comic-focused Fantastic Four game. I've enjoyed the movie game for the most part, but after experiencing these bonus missions, I can't deny that it's closer to what I've pictured wanting from a Fantastic Four game. Keep the same core gameplay mechanics from the main game, but transplant it into a comic-focused universe, so I really enjoyed the bonus chapters in that way. But that's all of the bonus content in this game, so let's next discuss the sound design in Fantastic Four 2005.
It's It's clobbering time.
Let's first start by looking at the main voice cast, which is the same cast from the movie. In the game's behind-the-scenes videos, each of them discuss things like their role and whether they were a comic fan prior to the movie, and we even get to see them record some of their lines. We'll start with Michael Chiklis, who plays the Thing. I really love the voice he does for Thing, and I thought he did a great job in both the film and the game, and I was also pleased to see that he seemed to be having a lot of fun with the role.
There were a handful of Marvel comics that I really loved, but the Fantastic Four was my favorite, and particularly the character of Ben Grimm, the Thing. And I said to my brother at the time, you know, if they ever make a Fantastic Four movie, that's my role. I just related to him, you know, rock hard He-Man, you know, with a heart. That's me.
Make mine sunny side up, Matchstick.
Whatever, Chancellor.
Let go of me, Reed.
Now we should also redo You've Done Enough for Feedback.
Let go of me, Reed.
Same exertion.
Look at me. Don't tell me to calm down.
Good read.
It's clobbering time.
Next is Ioan Gruffudd playing Mr. Fantastic. I always liked him in the movie and thought he was well cast as Reed Richards. In the game, I think he does a good enough job, although I imagine this was a tough role to do exciting voiceover for, since Reed is kind of a stick in the mud in the game. He's very matter-of-fact, mostly giving orders or talking about something science-y, which we'll see more examples of shortly. So I don't think Ioan had a lot to work with here. Still, he gives it a good effort, so I respect his dedication. Also, I should mention ahead of these clips that he's actually from the UK, so he's putting on an American accent for the role, which I think is quite impressive.
I've only done sort of voiceover work to screen, you know, either to a commercial or to my character on the screen, so it was bizarre to be in sort of an isolated sort of booth and try and recreate the character that I haven't actually seen, you know. But of course I've played him in the movie, so a lot of it was replicated in the game, which will be very exciting for the fans, you know, to play actual scenes from the movie.
Dinosaurs? Wonderful. I think they're trying to kill us. I think they're trying to kill us.
Good, and try one.
Try a little one like out of breath too, like you've just been running and chased by robots.
I think they're trying to kill us. Yeah, more.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to kill us. That statue of Horus is emitting strange energy readings.
Good, one more.
That statue of Horus is emitting strange energy readings. Use your shield to reflect the blasts at the statue. It's vulnerable.
Yes, it is.
It's vulnerable. Attack. It's vulnerable. Attack. Good work, team.
Bring it down. Just attack.
Okay. Good work, team.
I also thought this was interesting when he describes how he filmed the scenes where he uses his powers.
And as an actor preparing for this part, I just had to open my imagination really, because all of the special effects, you know, i.e. my arm stretching, is going to be done afterwards. So I was continually during the project having my arm tied behind my back and sort of imagining my arm elongating and sort of starting one shot, just my legs as if I was jumping to the other side of the street or something, and then picking it up on a separate shot and me coming into frame as if I've stretched along the street. So it was just leaving everything to the power of the imagination, really.
Next, let's look at Chris Evans playing the Human Torch. It's pretty fun watching these clips now, seeing a younger Chris Evans before his career completely skyrocketed after his role as Captain America. It's also fun because the Boy Scout Captain America role is in such contrast to the cocky Johnny Storm character, but that's a compliment to Chris's range.
Doing the voiceover for the Fantastic Four video game was a lot of fun. It's a completely different experience than playing the part in the movie. You really have to nail the feeling and emotion of the lines with only your voice, which is an interesting challenge.
I feel better already. I feel better already.
Hey, Rockhead, less talking, more punching. Dang, you really got ugly.
One more like that.
Dang, you really got ugly. How'd you do that?
Good, even more impressive.
It's hero time. Flame all the way on.
I can't tell you how psyched I am to be in the Fantastic Four video game. I've been a gamer for years, so being able to see and hear myself in the game is going to be amazing.
Next is Jessica Alba as Sue Storm. I actually really respect Jessica's dedication to the role, as she seemed the most invested in getting the character right. For example, in a separate interview with writer Martin Senior, he states that she was the one who requested the most revisions to her character in the script.
When we wrote the script to try and mimic the comic books as well as the movie, there were still changes that the actors themselves brought to the character, and little touches and how they would behave or act. And mainly we wanted the characters in the game to feel like the characters in the movie. So often in the voiceover sessions when we were directing them, they'd say, well, I wouldn't say that, you know, or that doesn't sound like me. And so then we would rewrite on the fly. Specifically, Jessica was the most, had the most particular notes about her character, because I think Sue in our version was a lot more wisecracking, and she was very adamant about Sue Storm being the Invisible Woman, not the Invisible Girl, and that she also was a librarian and was a scientist and was very smart and reserved. So we ended up pulling back some of her dialogue to kind of match that.
I don't know what those early lines looked like, so I can't say whether they were good changes or not, but I do at least respect that Jessica was striving to elevate her character. I think it's fitting to highlight Sue's smarts as well, especially since it's part of her character in the movie, but also the comics, since when Reed goes on one of his sciencey tangents, it's often Sue who's the one to translate the science speak into recognizable words for Johnny and Ben. In the Ultimate Comics, Sue is also a biotechnologist. Martin also mentioned Alba stating that Sue is the Invisible Woman and not the Invisible Girl, which I think is an interesting distinction as well, because in the comics, she was actually originally named the Invisible Girl until it was later changed to Woman, as that term carried an association of maturity with it. But all of that to say that I like how invested Jessica Alba was with her character, and she seems to be having fun in the role based on these clips.
So it's, it's kind of a dream come true to actually be in a video game.
One just a little quicker. This should knock those.
This should knock those jerks on their butts.
Perfect. One like that.
This should knock those jerks on their butts. We made it. We made it. Our air supply is limited. We have to move fast. Let's just get those shields and get out of here. Let's just get those shields and get out of here. Same plan.
What's your piece?
Same plan. Same plan.
Good. What happened to those? One more.
Look, another elevator.
Get over to it when it's even. Johnny calls out another elevator.
Same plan. We can't hold them off forever.
Perfect. Next time.
There's only one brake left. We have to protect it. There's only one brake left. We have to protect it. Yes, Reed, we're on Dragon Man's tail, literally. It's not pretty.
Not pretty. You should see Blast.
Who? Who?
Never mind. I'm inside the security center. As soon as I access the mainframe, head for the service elevators.
Roger that. Roger that.
It's incredibly exciting to be part of both the game and the movie. It feels like a complete package, like the right marriage to be part of both. It's sort of surreal to see someone and also to play myself and control myself. So yeah, it's really cool to be part of both, and seeing my face and my body and all the movements in a virtual me is very cool. So I love being part of this.
Lastly, we have Julian McMahon as Dr. Doom. I think Julian does a good job with the character for what he's given. I've been mixed on the characterization of Doom in the movie, but it's mostly due to how he's presented in the script as opposed to Julian's portrayal. Even though the movie is meant to be an origin story, everything feels very low scale for Doom. Victor spends the first half of the film being very passive and reactionary, learning about his powers and becoming frustrated at losing Sue and his company. Then, when he fully becomes Doom and we reach the climax of the film, it still feels rather low level and never really does the character justice. I think my problem is that he feels like a villain of the week, where in the comics, he's a major global threat. He doesn't just want to defeat the Fantastic Four, he also wants to rule the world, and in the comics, you know he's capable enough to do it. But we don't feel that level of threat in the movie, and despite it being an origin film, I think we should. In fact, the 1996 script by Michael France actually accomplished this in my opinion, and although he receives a writing credit for the movie, this draft and the final film are much different. For some examples regarding Doom in it, he's presumed dead after the space mission where the Fantastic Four get their powers, but about halfway into the script, he mysteriously returns and we already see him fully armored, seizing control of Latveria and sitting on his throne in the castle, with the military helpless to bypass his defenses. He even later addresses the United Nations with Doombots by his side as security. Even better, he later uses Adaptoids against the Fantastic Four. For those of you unfamiliar with Adaptoids, they can replicate the powers of anyone they're fighting, so in this case they were using the F4's powers against them. Another cool example is when Doom captures the F4 as part of his world domination plan. He traps Johnny at the center of a device to use his flame ability as a furnace to power it, which I thought was pretty intense. So my point is that the Doom in that draft was much more strategic, threatening, and larger than life, while the movie version felt a little too low level. But going back to Julian, for what the movie seemed to be going for, I think he was well cast, portraying a very charismatic, but bitter and calculating Victor.
It's really very exciting to be in both the Fantastic Four movie and obviously to be in the video game. I'm a huge video game kind of freak myself, but it's going to be very strange seeing myself in a video game and quite surreal. It's, you know, my face, my body, and it's very like us, trust me, the scanning they did for this thing is quite extraordinary. Playing a character that is so deeply rooted in the history of the Fantastic Four is firstly a great honor for me because I'm a huge Fantastic Four fan myself. And I have been of the cartoons and of the comic books since as far as I can remember. So to be able to play Victor Von Doom was really just quite amazing, even if he is a bad guy.
We need to know more right now. We need to know more right now.
All those are great. Thank you. Reed's answer to you is no.
Von Doom Industries is proud to be endowing this magnificent new Egyptian wing. Von Doom Industries is proud to be endowing this magnificent new Egyptian wing. What's this? Another one of Reed Richards' cosmic failures? What's this? Another one of Reed Richards' cosmic failures? Sue could have been killed. What were you thinking? Sue could have been killed. What were you thinking? Come at me again, Richards. Do your worst.
As far as the main cast voicing their characters in the game, I think everyone overall does a pretty good job. It's about what you'd expect from a movie game, which probably sounds like a backhanded compliment, but I mean it as a positive. I don't think I've covered a movie game where the film actors haven't struggled with voiceover. It sounds like something that would be easy, but it's actually quite a big transition, going from using your full body to just your voice, especially with very limited recording sessions. So I was mostly just happy to see that they seemed to give it a good effort, and overall, I think the voiceover in the game landed pretty well. Continuing on, usually at this point, we talk about the game's original soundtrack, but I instead want to take a look at a couple more of those character-specific songs, like the one for The Thing by Jurassic 5 that we heard earlier, since I think it's a unique aspect of the game, and the instrumentals of those songs are used as background throughout the game anyway. In an interview with IGN, Tim Riley of Activision briefly describes why they took this approach. Creating 4 unique character-driven songs and music video-like trailers is a whole new approach at integrating music into games. This project underscores our strategy to use artists that are aligned with the content and feel of our titles, further enhancing the overall sensory experience for players. So it sounds to me like this was sort of an experimental marketing decision. Furthermore, the Mr. Fantastic music video even debuted on MTV. I also found some old IGN interviews where the various bands talk about the experience. To start, the bands didn't get to choose their character, they were approached by Activision with a character in mind, but they were still given the freedom in crafting their song. Go Betty Go was the band assigned to Invisible Woman, and the only direction they were given was to try and write the song from Sue's perspective, which we'll see is what they did in a moment. Go Betty Go also stated that they didn't have much knowledge of the character ahead of time, but researched the comics and spent a lot of time revising their song to get it right, which I thought was pretty cool.
You can't touch me. You can't feel me. I'm invisible. You can't beat me. You can't see me. I'm everywhere.
A band called The Explosion was chosen for the Human Torch, which is quite fitting. Looking at their history, they're kind of a time capsule of a band, with their discography mostly from the early 2000s. They were picked due to their existing relationship with Activision at the time, having had their songs No Revolution and Here I Am used in the Tony Hawk games. The Explosion didn't know much about the Fantastic Four prior to the gig, but unlike Go Betty Go, they didn't take a lot of time to create their song. Member of the band Dave Walsh says, quote, "So I think after I did wrap my mind around it, it took me about an hour to write the song, you know? And then I brought it to the guys in the band and we messed with it a little bit and got it just right. Then we went in and tracked it in one day and that was it." As far as the track itself, I'm personally not really feeling the lyrics or the vocals of the chorus, but I do really like the background instrumentals. The last track is for Mr. Fantastic by Taking Back Sunday. This track ended up on one of their albums, so I think it's sadly a bit too much of a copyright risk to play, but as you'd expect, it's the best of the bunch, so it's not surprising it was the one used to market on MTV. I'll still have it linked in the description if you'd like to check it out for yourselves though. But overall, I thought it was a cool choice to get recognizable bands at the time to produce character songs for the game, and the instrumentals are fun to hear during levels as well. But now that we've looked at the game's audio, let's start to wrap things up in the conclusion.
It's clobbering time.
As far as movie games go, Fantastic Four 2005 is pretty solid. There's nothing about it that really blew me away, but there also wasn't anything that really detracted from the experience either. It's one of those games that's just across the board good. I don't find that to be a bad thing either, as a good game can still be a fun game, and this one certainly succeeded where it matters most, and that's with the gameplay. The combat felt strong enough that it held up on multiple playthroughs, and the developers seemed to have replayability in mind with all the unlockable bonus content and upgrades, so it's one that you definitely get your money's worth when looking at fun factor and playtime. I also really appreciated the effort to pull from the comics, despite it being a movie tie-in. It was clear to me that the developers were all fans of the comics and strived to show players fun elements from them, while still adhering to the confines of the movie. I think they succeed in giving fans what they want, and that the game as a whole is a well-rounded experience. So to tie things back to the beginning of the video, I ultimately don't agree with Zach's comments stating that this was a shitty game. I think 7 Studios did a respectable job on it, and it's a solid superhero game that fans will enjoy. That being said, I still think there's room for improvement, so I'm curious to see what they did for the sequel, Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. Although strangely, it seems that 7 Studios only worked on the PS2 and Wii versions, despite it being a PS3 and 360 next-gen title. Still, I'll be looking into both versions for that retrospective, which will be the next deep dive video on the channel, so keep an eye out for that coming soon. For my casual retrospective series, I'm still planning to cover the Batman and Robin game, but I'm pushing it back to make room for a couple other videos I want to prioritize. With spooky season approaching, I thought it would be fun to check out the Blade movie games and see what they're all about. This will be my first time playing them, so I'm really curious about their gameplay. But I think that'll do it for this video, so thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Also, a big thank you to those of you who have been supporting the channel through YouTube memberships and Patreon. Your kindness and generosity means a ton to me, so thank you very much.